suppose it does have a concept. It's not a concept album in the way a concept album might have been a concept album in the 70s, but there's a thread to it, because I wanted to make a record that had a flow, like a narrative to it, so it takes you on a little journey. It starts somewhere and it ends somewhere. And in between all of that, I wanted to write about things that interest me, that I'm excited about. So it's not a collection of love songs. It's about all kinds of things, philosophical things, and even unusual things like quantum physics and cosmology. Obviously lends a lot of imagery to the album, but it's really about the human condition and about the reality of life and death and what those things mean on a spiritual level as well as on an earthly level. So without getting too heavy about it, I guess that's kind of the inspiration for most of the songs in one way or another. It was 15 years really since the first two albums, which I made for myself really, Dream Spinning and Circle. They were records that were how I wanted them to be. But between then and now, I've been so busy with commissions and scores and producing other people, just hasn't really been time for me to focus on my own work. So there was a sporadic sort of collection of bits and pieces which ended up being Past Lives, which is the last album, which was never quite finished as an album, but it was important that I released that before Jupiter was finished, or it wouldn't make any sense, because there's quite a difference of style between one and the next. So yeah, Jupiter is the first thing I've done in about 15 years where it's been a definite sort of decision to make a record for me the way I wanted to make it, and to go all out on it really, to just to make the best record I could, to make the kind of record I'd want to listen to, with songs that were about things that you don't hear very often, things that interest me but nobody writes about because it's too weird probably. It started just as a simple little acoustic guitar song, and when I was recording the demo of it, the first idea, I just had a little bass drum pulse all the way through, because it was a nicer sound than a click for a click track, because it's a very metered sort of song, and I wanted to use echoes on the guitar which were timed, so I wanted to have a regular measure.
I have seen the stars forming, I have seen them burn, I have been to Jupiter, this is what I've learned. None of us are all alone, everything is one. There's nothing that cannot be known, everything is one.
So it started like that, and it would have probably stayed like that had I not later on had the idea of adding the drums, which I worked with Sasha. We spent a few days just developing the part, which is very spontaneous sounding, but there's quite a lot of design in it as well. There's lots of nice little comments on the lyrics and things that he plays, and it really injected a lot of energy into the track. And at that point I thought, yeah, that's great, that's how it will be. And then I started working with Danny Thompson on a few things, and I thought that would be great as well, with those drums and the way the track had shaped up, and he agreed to do it, which was fantastic. And it really adds something. So those elements coming in really dictated the arrangement of the song, because there's not an awful lot in it in terms of different instruments. There's drums, there's Danny's bass, and there's one main acoustic picked guitar and the vocals. That's basically it, other than a couple of little touches on other guitars here and there, but because of the way it's treated and the effects that come in and out on different instruments, it sounds quite sort of full on and busy. And lyrically, it's kind of about the same subjects as I said about the album, but Jupiter is kind of a metaphor for wherever we go when we're not alive, be it when we die or in between lives, if that's your belief. So it just seemed like a nice thing to use poetically to talk about that.
Child, teach me all you can remember now. For when you grow older, you will forget how. We are born to live our lives, some of us are free.
When I started the album, I had an idea that I wanted to create sounds that were very otherworldly, that were engaging and musical, but I didn't want to use synthesizers or samples to achieve that, because I think sometimes that can be very static as a result, or it's almost too easy to do it that way, because it's very easy to make a nice sparkly sound with a synth. But there's something more evocative about the fact that it's treatments on musical performances. So some of the effects might be coming off of, say, a little guitar part, but then it's going through a harmonizer with echoes and some reverse looping and things like that, using the Eventide and the AMS delay, which I really like. They've got a great sound to them. And you can play the sound then. You can make it change and do things, and you can respond to it because it's a live thing and it's an organic thing. So that was kind of a brief to myself, to make the record without using synths or samplers, but to have those kind of interesting textures and layers and effects in there. But to give them some reality, to make them valid musically as well, so they're not just effects for their own sake, but they're adding something to the musical arrangement, and they're coming from a musical performance in the first place. The only thing that I do use on the album as a synth is the Moog Taurus, which is just an awesome bass pedals, basically. It just has such a big, rich, deep sound. It sounds great. It always sits really well in the mix. So on tracks where there's not a bass guitar, it's the Moog, but that's the only synth on the album. If anything, it's quite liberating, because there are all sorts of different ways of setting up the effects chain. For example, on the track Cosmos, which is basically a piano solo, I first of all set up a little chain of effects so that while I was playing the track, I had some feedback in my headphones of what sort of sounds it was making. And that's a really nice feeling, to be playing a grand piano, but hearing all these great spacey sort of string sounds coming back to you from the effects. So that makes it very easy, because you can perform with the sound and it makes you play differently, so it naturally will work. Another way is during the actual mix to fly things in live into the mix. Now that's quite hard work, because you've got to be right on it, and it's a performance thing, and I like mixing in that way. But the other thing is often experimenting with things, taking whatever it is you're trying to treat, like maybe it's a guitar and you're putting it through some effects, and experiment until something cool happens, and then when something cool's happening, print that to tape where you can set it into the track where you want it. So it's kind of, you do have a safety net. You can make mistakes and you can go wrong and just like magnify the good bits and extract things, little weird things that happen on the tape, little noises off a guitar that you didn't mean to make, or at the end of a song or something, sometimes will just sound great through a certain set of treatments and create a great little sound. So that'll become a loop that gets used in the song as part of the music. So it's as much by chance and experimentation as it is by design. I think both approaches So no, I didn't find it limiting. I found it quite freeing and liberating, because working just exclusively with a synth and with programming, in a way, that I find very limiting, because you set up a sound and there's a lot of parameters you can change and everything else, but it's always that thing of being very electronic, and it does exactly what you tell it to do. But when you're playing an instrument that's got strings and it's fingers on metal or whatever it is, and then you're manipulating the effects in real time, it's got an unpredictable, almost dangerous quality, which I really like. I've always liked working with an analog console for a lot of reasons. The sound is a big part of it, and it's a lovely desk with a great sound and good punchy sound, very open EQ. It's got its own kind of compression in the mix bus, which is really nice. It's impossible to distort it. You can push it as hard as you like and you just get this nice compression, and it just looks at you and says, "Is that all you got?" And you can keep pushing. But as a performance tool, yeah, I think I often say that you can move a fader in a musical way, but it's hard to draw a line on a screen in a musical way with any feeling. You can arrange the track on the desk and play it like an instrument. And in fact, on a couple of other records that I produced, I've done things such as on John Pearson's album. We had a combination of different drone sounds to a track. Some were really low brass notes, some was a deep fuzzy guitar. But just blending those tones live into the track made this texture that continuously changed and was always different and unpredictable. But you couldn't have done that any other way.
Just let it all go and start again. Don't you know you still have friends?
Well, of course, as soon as you finish one thing, you're always thinking about the next. And I think no concrete ideas about the next record yet, other than areas I'd like to explore more are more groove-based, rhythm-based music. In that working with Sasha has been great, and we've come up with some nice, interesting approaches to the drums, and I'd like to take that a bit further. And yeah, we'll just have to see what evolves apart from that.
There's a wind for sure that'll bring a change. Oh, that last lonesome night, it breaks your heart and it chokes your fire. Will that last lonesome night never end? I look over my shoulder to see where I've been, and the voice inside says take it on the chin. But the last lonesome night, it breaks my heart and it chokes my fire. Will that last lonesome